Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to today's edition of our Seven Investing podcast. I'm Seven Investing founder and CEO Simon Erickson. We always chat on this show about how it's our mission to empower you to invest in your future, and how we're long-term investors and we're unfazed by anything that's happening in the short term. But my goodness, it's feeling like that's harder and harder every day right now. We've got so much market volatility out there. We're seeing a sell-off in tech stocks. There's a lot of red ink in our portfolios. It kind of challenges your conviction to be a long-term investor. And so we're going to do a little bit different of a podcast today. We're going to bring in one of our partners. Nathan Worden is the host of The Market Game. He's also a long-term investor that kind of shares a lot of the same principles that we do here at Seven Investing. Nathan, I'm really excited to do this. It's a little different than our traditional podcast, but thanks very much for joining us here this afternoon.
Super excited to be here. Really excited to chat. Thanks for having me on.
Nathan, one of the things I'm really excited to talk with you about is you are also empowering others out there. You're going to talk about a couple individual stock ideas, a cryptocurrency idea later on the program here. But let's just kind of start with your perspective. I just described you as a long-term investor, but give me a little bit of background about how you got to investing in the stock market and how you think of yourself as an investor.
Sure thing. So I used to be a wedding photographer, and back in 2013, I was living a very frugal lifestyle, shooting weddings, and then also working as a resident director at Chapman University. And in that line of work, you get your housing paid for because you live in the residence hall of 600 first-year students. And so when one has low bills and overhead and relatively higher income, you end up having some money to do what you want with. And so I know that I've been in a really blessed position to have that type of situation, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't waste it. And that's when I started looking for ways to put my money to work for me. And that's how I kind of found myself in investing. And as you mentioned at the top of the call, the recent market volatility, a lot of investors are seeing their portfolios take a huge dive in the last couple months to a year. And from my perspective, from when I started investing in 2013, the first thing that I did is I anchored my portfolio, just in the overall broad market. And I've never sold that initial first position. And looking out close to now a decade, I think it's so important to have that perspective and that lived experience of leaving your money in the market in certain positions that you have a lot of conviction in, because over time, human ingenuity and humans trying to solve problems for other humans tends to create value for all of us. And I really believe in that from an investing perspective.
That conviction is so important, Nathan. I think one of the most common questions I get is people that are just concerned. They're saying, is this going to fall farther if I put my money to work right now? Am I going to lose another 10, 20%? I'm scared as an investor right there. But a lot of that kind of washes out if you think about it with a long-term mindset. You don't get so worried about those 10 or 20% blips. It's going to really always be hard to catch the bottom. But if you're really kind of focused on years instead of months, it takes a little bit of that away. What kind of investor are you, Nathan? Are you a value investor? Are you a growth style investor? Do you not think about it that way? Any types of stocks that you tend to look for?
Yeah, I tend to be more growth and mid to smaller cap growth. And mostly that because I do enjoy the idea that these newer, smaller companies are making the world a better place, and they're trying something audacious. They're trying to solve a problem, make the world better in some way, shape, or form. They've got a lot of challenges to overcome, but if they succeed, it's really special and really interesting. And so, I always anchor my portfolio in something, more like the S&P 500. But then with a large portion of my time and my funds, I am looking for those opportunities that are higher growth, because they're trying to do something pretty interesting.
Well, let's double click on the thing that we mentioned earlier about us both empowering others, empowering other investors. One of the things I loved about what you're doing out there and led me to want to have you partner with Seven Investing is you're the host of The Market Game. Tell us a little bit about what this is and how you're using it to help other people become better investors.
Yeah, so The Market Game is a bracket style investing competition that I started because I just wanted to be around other smart investors, hopefully smarter than myself by a lot. And the idea was that, there's so many different avenues for people to have fun while competing in a friendly manner, whether it's going and playing, basketball in a local league or trivia or just really anything. And I didn't see, and I'm sure there are idea dinners and there are a lot of different ways to engage in investing. But I didn't really see like a March Madness style bracket live pitching game out there. And so I thought I'd start it. And so we've actually been doing it for a little over a year now. And it's basically just, it started by me reaching out to people on Twitter and saying like, hey, do you want to give a pitch live on a company that you like? And there's going to be 4 to 6 other pitchers also giving their ideas, their stock investing ideas. And then we're going to chat about them and we're going to try and poke holes in each other's thesis. And then we're going to vote and decide what we think is the best one. And through that process, it's so important to like, there's 6,000 publicly traded companies, and not just knowing the investment thesis for a specific stock that you're looking at, but comparing that up against 1, 2, 3 other different ideas right next to each other, and to have a different person each arguing why they like theirs and maybe why they like it more than yours is like a really stimulating and interesting exercise to think about investing in. So that's the idea with investing and with the market game. And I think that, if you look at things like CrossFit or the NBA, a lot of times people really enjoy playing, but also watching. And so the market game is one where you can kind of have a little bit of both. You might be an individual investor yourself, but if you attend the market game, you can hear a pitch and then also ask a question. And so you can recognize talent and go out and maybe give a pitch yourself, and also interact. And there's this shared culture and shared thing that we all enjoy doing. We can connect with each other over it, get better at it together, and watch our favorite team and root on our favorite pitcher. So there's all this kind of fun dynamics to it. I love doing it, and we're actually having one tomorrow. We have it every single month, and so definitely would want to invite anyone who wants to come and watch to show up.
And how can we find out about that, Nathan? What is your Twitter handle? How can we learn more about these?
My Twitter handle is Nathan Worden, just Worden spelled Worden. And I think I've got the sign up link pinned in my bio. So if you want to register for the next game or the whole set, we've got one going every month for this year. You can find the registration through, my Twitter bio.
These are a lot of fun. I've been to 2 of them. They are very fast paced. It might be one of the most densely packed hours you spend for the month. And they're also fun too. It makes perfect sense that a basketball player like Nathan would have a March Madness style bracket for stock picking. I really encourage everybody to check these out. But for the purposes of this podcast here, Nathan, we are speaking to individual investors. They want to know, what are some of the best stocks that I can go out there and learn about right now? And so I'm going to be using you as the conduit from previous pitches that you've heard on your market game. You've brought 4 of them here to discuss on our podcast for this afternoon. The first was a company, I believe it came from Kyla Scanlon. She was pitching, or the person was pitching Constellation Brands. Tell me a little bit about this one. What did you think about the pitch, and what do you think about the investment opportunity here?
Yeah, so first off about the pitch, one thing I really appreciated is this pitch was done, I think, April last year. Lots of people pitching SPACs and high growth. And Kyla comes on and pitches Constellation Brands, which is a leader in the alcohol beverage space. So right off the bat, this was not one that people, I think, were primed to like. And I don't believe it won the game, but it is the one that has performed the best over the next year, which is pretty awesome. So Constellation Brands, they're primarily a beer company with about 70% of revenue coming from beer. Beer is a pretty elastic good, which means they don't have a ton of pricing power. And so a lot of people don't like that, and they pass right off the bat. But Constellation Brands is switching to a higher premium and higher margin products. They're looking to get into more like premium tequila and kind of branding and marketing themselves as a higher premium brand, which allows them to charge higher prices. So Kyla pitched this in April 9th of 2021. And that was the day they announced earnings on that day. They're pretty beat up in the market, but since then they're up about 7%, which is, 7 doesn't sound like a lot, but that's like 20 or 30% above a lot of the other pitches. So I love it when people bring off the wall ideas or ideas that are counter to what other people are really interested in at the moment.
It's not a sexy pitch, right? It's beer and wine and liquor and things like that, but it's a staple, consumer discretionary or consumer staple, really. I guess you could call it that, because it's so embedded. I mean, like doing such good brand marketing, it seems like one that's natural fit for a long-term investor like you are, Nathan.
Yeah, totally, exactly. It's also kind of funny that Constellation Brands, they invested in Canopy Growth, which is the cannabis company. Canopy Growth is down 82% since, I think since, yeah, in the last year. Which is funny is that Constellation Brands can still be up 7% after investing pretty heavily in that company. So it kind of just goes to show you that having a diversified portfolio, you're making some bets on some larger growth that could or could not work out. And as long as you've got that anchor, either in your personal portfolio or your business has the anchor of the revenue, it provides a lot of stability.
Perfect. And just finally, one last thing. What was it that Kyla really liked about the investment opportunity? Was there anything that stood out that she said? Is it branding? Is it marketing? Is it just a staple product? What was it that really won a lot of people over that listened to her pitch during that time?
Yeah, the one thing was that because they're now a lower, right now, they're mostly beer, but they're moving to premium brand stuff. That transition, people aren't really watching that once they transition, in the process of that transitioning, that's going to allow them to charge higher prices. And if you are looking at that right now, that might end up being a good investment.
Perfect. Okay, Nathan. Well, Constellation Brands, STZ, for anybody who wants to follow along, a pitch from last April. Another one you said was a gentleman, Chris Seifel, was pitching Moody's on the market game. Tell me about this one.
Yeah, so really respect Chris. He does a great job of just his fundamental research and being very process oriented and having a really grounded approach. His pitch for Moody's was essentially, they're an oligopoly. If you want to do anything in the credit space, you need to get credit services from a company like Moody's. I think there's only two others, and essentially it was a play on the fact that if you want to invest in a monopoly, you might as well invest in a monopoly that has regulation enforced monopoly.
Makes a lot of sense to me. Oh, Nathan, are you still there? Can we still hear you?
Yep, I can still hear you. Can you hear me?
Perfect. Yeah. Okay. So oligopoly, obviously S&P, Fitch, and Moody's are kind of like the three players that do credit ratings and all the debt and all that stuff like that. Sounds like Chris really pitched it pretty good, though. I know he's a very thorough investor. I'm sure that came through in the pitch that he had for the market game.
Yeah. So this is a really funny point. One thing that I've noticed over doing the market games for the past year is that just because you're well spoken or can communicate really well doesn't necessarily mean that your pitch will do really well. However, when I come across people who can both communicate and give a really good thesis, that's pretty special. And Chris does that really well.
Perfect. Okay. MCO for anybody who wants to follow Moody's. The third one we have is from Gaurav Kotak, pitching Vonage. What was it that stood out for you for this company?
Yeah. So Gaurav, this one I really like because it was kind of a diamond in the rough sort of idea. So most people think of Vonage as the funny ads and consumer phone service, but there's also a faster growing hidden gem of a business under the cash cow that most people are aware of in Vonage. So Vonage has three businesses, but all of them, they link to the same tech stack, which provides a differentiated advantage. And the part that people mostly don't see is their CPaaS business, the communication platform as a service. So that communication API is kind of a lot like what Twilio does. And so that is a 600 million revenue business. It's not growing as fast as Twilio. So a lot of times people just go, I want the best breed, I want Twilio. But the main point is actually that most people aren't even considering the CPaaS business in Vonage. And also, Vonage was recently announced that Erickson is going to be acquiring them. So the cool thing about this pitch, and one thing that I really love about the market game, is that individual people will find these kind of diamonds in the rough and bring them up, and then later on, a company like Erickson also notices it and goes and acquires Vonage. So right now, I think they're trading at a price that reflects what the offer price was. Gaurav in his pitch mentioned that he felt like there could be an acquisition, but he doesn't invest for that. But it's good to know the catalysts, and he ended up being right about that. Which I don't know. It's really cool to see when people make a prediction and then get it right, because it's hard,
especially when it's under followed, right? When the financial media is not catching on to those things that like a good analyst will catch on to expose that on the pitch, and then of course getting an acquisition offer that doesn't hurt at all. Fantastic. Okay, Vonage. Okay, so VG for anybody who want to follow that one. Nathan, the fourth one is not a stock. It is not an equity at all. It's a cryptocurrency. David Hoffman pitched Ethereum. Tell me about this one.
Yeah, so David Hoffman, he heads up the Bankless podcast. And so he's very much into the cryptocurrency space, and Ethereum is his favorite asset. The thing that I found really interesting about his Ethereum pitch is that he didn't mention the dynamic of the merge and the proof of stake situation, where Ethereum is currently a proof of work blockchain, and sometime this year they're going to be moving to a proof of stake system. So the way that the blockchain is validating their blocks, it's currently like Bitcoin, where it takes a lot of energy and a lot of electricity to validate, but they're moving to a proof of stake system where they don't have to use that energy, and the overall, it'll be a much more efficient way to validate the blockchain. So anyway, the thing that I appreciate about David's pitch is that he talked more about how decentralized finance is like money Legos, and how you can add the different components and reorganize them to make new financial products that couldn't have existed before. So the pitch is very much more on a utility sense, that DeFi is like the bones of the Ethereum ecosystem, and Ethereum, ETH, the asset, is like blood circulating and bringing nutrients to the different parts of the ecosystem. So he was also mentioning that competition is good for the consumer, and each of the decentralized applications that are being built on the blockchain are competing to become more capital efficient. And the more that they can upgrade their own software and be more capitally efficient with the asset of Ethereum, the more Ethereum can be used for. And therefore, if you hold Ethereum, it rises in utility and therefore value. So lots of I guess I would say noise in the cryptocurrency space. And it was fun to hear a utility-based argument for why Ethereum would be raising in value.
It's amazing. There's so much being done on Ethereum right now. We were just chatting about metaverse earlier today, and the NFTs are built upon Ethereum, which is a zillion different applications in this new Web 3.0, as it's becoming known now, world. And Ethereum is certainly, with the smart contracts and all the utility, like you mentioned, becoming a crowd favorite out there. Okay, so ETH is ETH if you wanted to invest in a cryptocurrency token. How about any other? Okay, so 4 picks here: Constellation Brands, Moodys, Vonage, and Ethereum. Are you allowed to pick a favorite? Do you have one of these 4 that you would personally invest in right now?
Yeah, so I actually did personally invest in Moody's recently. For me, it is a pretty high valuation at the moment, but I do like that oligopoly pitch. And so I do hold, actually, I think I hold all 4 of these. A lot of times at the market game, I'll personally invest in what people are pitching in, sometimes small positions. But if I like the pitch, I'll invest in all 4 of these I liked. And so I do own parts of all 4.
It's really cool. It opens your eyes to a lot of things in a lot of places that you weren't necessarily looking before. A lot of these companies are not in the headlines of the financial media. Any final thoughts, Nathan, as we're kind of closing out? It's kind of a wonky time for the market, a lot of volatility out there. People are worried about tech stocks. Any perspective you can give to our long-term investing audience here today?
Yeah, so this is, you didn't ask me to do this, but I did want to take a moment and just kind of talk about how much respect I have for 7 investing. So one thing that I really believe in strongly, it's super hard to do, is posting transparency and results. And I do that myself personally to hold myself accountable. And I really recommend that everyone does that, for their own personal portfolio, because you learn so much by holding yourself accountable and by looking at where you've been. And by looking at where you've been, you also are able to zoom out, right? So that ability to zoom out, you can't have unless you do a good job of tracking. And tracking isn't fun when you underperform the market, but everyone underperforms the market at some point, right? We all get to say we're right depending on the time frame, and we all are wrong depending on the time frame. And so for investors who are looking at their portfolios in the last year and are down or not being in the market, I'm one of them, and many people are. It really helps to zoom out. And I really respect that 7 Investing does that you guys post your, you do recommendations and you post results, and that helps create a conversation about what's actually going on and allows us to get better or understand that things maybe really aren't that bad, or spot opportunities when the rest of the market is leaving an area and we can jump in. Another thing I really like is that the depth of the research that you all do and the webinars and the reports you put out and the questions that you answer, I feel really strongly that engaging in this type of discussion around stocks and investing and digging deep into a company that you like is good for yourself as just a habit. And what I see you all doing is encouraging people to do that themselves and engage with other smart people who are really thinking very thoughtfully about these different opportunities. And I just think that that makes the world a better place. So I wanted to say thanks for doing that and keep on doing it.
Man, I really appreciate it, Nathan. Thank you for the kind words about Seven Investing. It certainly is in our DNA to think long term. That means you've got to stick it out there for years. You know, we're not too concerned about what's going on in the next month or two. It certainly has been a tough couple of months for growth style investors like myself, but you know, we know it's going to come back around. And we look at 5-year periods or longer, stock market tends to revert back to allowing those great companies to outperform. Nathan, I really appreciate you being on the show here today. Thanks for joining me on the Seven Investing podcast.
It was a blast. Thanks for having me on. Catch you next time.
And everybody check out the market game. Nathan's doing some really fun stuff. It's not only opening your eyes to a bunch of different investment opportunities, but it's also getting you to think about things you might not necessarily have thought about before. I wanted to feature some of his innovative, excellent work that's empowering others here on our podcast today. So I appreciate everybody for tuning in. That's it for this episode of our Seven Investing podcast. We are here to empower you to invest in your future. We are Seven Investing.